All right, we're rolling.
Ready? I'm Marc Morial, and I serve as president of the National Urban League. We are one of this nation's historic civil rights and urban advocacy organizations. 3 years ago, a tragedy of untold proportions took place in Minneapolis. George Floyd was murdered by a Minneapolis police officer in concert with other officers who watched George Floyd die on the streets of Minneapolis. That moment was captured by a courageous young woman. That courageous young woman, with her cell phone, videotaped this entire American tragedy, and the world got a chance to see what happened. As a result, millions and millions took to the streets and protested racial injustice. The outrage stemmed from the suites of America to the halls of Congress to the streets of America and beyond, to Europe and Africa and Asia and Latin America. The outrage stemmed a moment when many made commitments to undo this nation's historic, systemic racism and racial exclusion. As a part of that, many American institutions, including many American corporations, made significant new commitments to address this overriding American challenge by committing new philanthropic dollars, by committing to change and reform their business practices. Some embraced diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives for the first time. Some increased access to capital for Black-owned businesses for the first time. Some who had been committed renewed that commitment and upped that commitment. But there were many others that stood silently on the sidelines and made no commitment. Today, 3 years after this tragic murder, we join in calling on American business to publicly report on the public commitments they made. If you've made a commitment, have you followed through on that commitment? And what has that commitment meant? We call on those who did not make a commitment to understand that a commitment by them is necessary for this country to live up to the true meaning of its creed. That a commitment by them is essential if we are going to undo systemic racism in America. I also ask American business leaders not to be intimidated by rhetoric from some that seeks to undermine diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yes, there are some in the public square who have criticized this, but their criticisms ring hollow against a fact pattern where the racial wealth gap is large, health disparities seem intractable, too many young Black children do not have an opportunity to graduate from high school, poverty is at a too high in a country of tremendous prosperity and wealth. Against that backdrop, these commitments are essential. They were promises made, and we want those promises to be kept. Some, yes, and I've spoken to many, have taken these commitments seriously, have followed through on these commitments, have sought out our wisdom and insight in curating their steps forward. And I'll continue to work and push them. Some have not met this moment, and it is important that they meet this moment with their commitments. This is why we've joined with a number of others, including the National Action Network, the National Association of Investment Companies, and a number of other professional organizations, including the National Association of Securities Professionals, to launch an effort that creates a place where companies can report in a way that'll be transparent and apparent to all. This moment, 3 years later, raises an important question. Was the death and the tragic murder of George Floyd simply a moment, or was it the beginning of a movement? We work, we pray, and we'll fight to ensure that it is a movement and not simply a moment. A movement of progress, a movement towards racial justice, a movement towards racial healing, a movement where we say enough is absolutely enough. So I'm Marc Morial, I'm president of the National Urban League, and I close by saying we pray for the family of George Floyd, and we pray for the families of all victims of violence, whether it be police violence, whether it be violence by one who knows one, directed towards one who knows another. We pray and we hope in this moment of prayer that we will have the energy and the strength and the sustenance to continue to wage this battle and fight this fight. Thank you.
Got it.